This is Michael Woodward, and this is Season 3, Episode 215 of the Jumblethink Podcast.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Jumblethink Podcast, where we interview amazing entrepreneurs about their journey of turning dreams and ideas into reality. Along the way, we'll share some tips on how you can turn your own dreams and ideas into reality too. Our guest on today's episode is Stuart Day. More about Stuart in a moment. Whether you're new or a long-time listener to the Jumblethink Podcast, we encourage you to head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts and click that subscribe button. While you're there, leave us a rating and review. Let others know what you think of the podcast too. Now let's jump into today's episode. Hey there, welcome to the Jumblethink Podcast. My name is Michael Woodward. I am your host. We have an incredible episode lined up for you today. Before we get going, we want to thank our sponsors for today's episode, Mighty Travels and OpportunityInChina.com. Now, Mighty Travels will help you find the best prices for your travel needs. All you have to do is go on over to mightytravels.com/jumblethink to learn more. OpportunityInChina.com, they help students find educational opportunities in Asia. They also help teachers find positions teaching abroad. They're doing really great stuff. You can check them out at OpportunityInChina.com. We'll be talking more about both of those sponsors later in the episode. I am super excited about today's guest. His name is Stuart Day. I've been a fan of his work for the last several years, and a year ago, I got to meet him at the Artisan Guitar Show in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Stuart has been practicing the fine art of luthiery for all of his adult life. After working with some of the finest in the industry, Stuart is now proud to offer his own selection of world-class acoustic archtop and flat-top steel string guitars. Each and every Stuart Day guitar is exquisite, handcrafted, and a reflection of Stuart's years of experience and dedication to the craft of luthiery. Now, beyond luthiery, Stuart's got some other cool entrepreneurial endeavors going on. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the art of building handcrafted guitars and so much more in today's episode. So let's dive into the conversation we had with our friend, Stuart Day. Our guest today is Stuart Day. Stuart, thanks so much for coming out to the farm and being here with us today and sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Now, I don't know exactly how I found you. I know that I met you at the Artisan Guitar Show in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, but I'd heard about you before. I think the first thing I saw, a matter of fact, it was probably Pinterest, going through pins, and I see the church guitar, which is one of your models, and I'm just like, wow, that's a stunning arch top. It's
Thank you.
Really cool.
Yeah, I knew I made it when I saw myself on Pinterest.
The world revolves around Pinterest,
Yeah.
Instagram, and trying to survive the chaos of Twitter and Facebook.
Yeah.
So I want to get into your backstory and how you became a luthier, how entrepreneurship is a part of your story, because yes, you are building guitars and doing that, but you're doing so much more in the world of business and building businesses, which is truly the definition of entrepreneur. So tell us a little bit about that story of going, hey, there's a different path for me here.
Well, I guess it started in college. I was at Penn State, and I was really interested in two things. I was interested in fine art because I was always kind of a creative kid growing up. And I was interested in political philosophy. And the more I studied political philosophy, the more interest I got in the Industrial Revolution and how labor and what we do and how we do it kind of affects us as people and society. And so those two interests kind of laid the groundwork, I would say.
Yeah.
And then it was just a fortuitous moment. I met an old friend who had built his own guitar, and I thought that was really cool. I was a musician.
Yeah.
And so it had never really occurred to me like people made guitars. I just played them and never really thought about it.
They came from some factory somewhere off in who knows where.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of a light bulb moment, and I did some research, and I found a school in Michigan called the Gallup School of Luthiery.
Yeah.
And I thought, I really am interested in that, because I was really interested in my studies in college, but I didn't know how I was going to turn that into anything career-wise.
Yeah.
So I was already struggling with that idea, like, how am I going to do this with my life? So I left Penn State after my sophomore year, got 3 jobs, saved up, borrowed a little bit from my parents, and I went to Gallup School of Luthiery. And it was just one of these, it was just like I had found my calling, I'm not really a fatalistic person, so I don't typically think in those terms, but it was like my skills, my natural talents, my weaknesses, my strengths, it all just kind of fit really well with Luthiery.
Yeah.
And I did well. I had kind of a natural knack for it. So then the owner of the school, who is Brian Gallup, he's a world famous restoration guy. He also builds his own beautiful instruments.
Right.
He offered me an apprenticeship towards the end of my schooling, and I took it, and that was a pretty amazing experience. I was his apprentice, but my main role was essentially as a assistant instructor. And that was a big, it taught me that one of the best things you can do for yourself if you're trying to really get good at something is to teach and educate people.
Right.
Because it's sort of, it's easy to, you can show somebody how to do something and they can copy it, but to actually get them to understand why they're doing it the way that they're doing it, and kind of really do a deep dive into understanding the fundamental concepts, it's really good to have students asking you questions all the time.
Yeah. And there is a lot of innovation going in the space of guitars right now with there's what is it, sloped back, is that right, where it kind of slopes to the top, and then there's the armrest stuff and new materials that are constantly evolving and changing.
Yes.
And so if you are really in this space and not just copying someone, you've got to be thinking about what's really going on and why are people doing this, what's the sustainability,
Right.
what are those questions
Right.
that need to be asked. So for you, as you made that transition in the luthier school and started to understand that, hey, you got to understand why this needs this form and how that structurally is sound. How did that change your perspective of saying, I'm building guitars, I'm just taking wood and cutting them apart and building it, and then start thinking about the mechanics behind why? How did that change your perspective on an approach on building?
Well, I wouldn't say that it changed my approach, because I was still pretty young in the business, so I didn't really have like an approach already, but it really set the tone for the rest of my career, because it made me realize that putting together the pieces and building an instrument is not that difficult.
Right.
You need some basic woodworking aptitude and a couple tools, and you can make it happen. But to really build a musical instrument on a world-class level, it is such a complex and dynamic thing to understand and to try to do, and there's so many rabbit holes that you can dive down. And I think really what it did is it made me fall in love with it.
Oh, that's cool.
Because I've always been kind of I've always lived up here in my head, and I just really like being challenged constantly. And if it was just this matter of putting pieces together and building guitars, I don't think I would still be doing it today.
Wow.
So I think it's that complex nature of trying to really understand what's going on here and putting together an instrument that's both beautiful but also structurally sound and tonally balanced, and that building an instrument that's tonally what you want it to be is a very nuanced and complex process, and it just is always fascinating to me. I'm always learning more.
Yeah. One of the things that fascinated me about your story as I was reading through your website, watching your blogs and different things that you've posted on YouTube was that you found along the way that you were saying you gravitated towards Luthiery because it married a whole bunch of different things inside of you, skills you had, passions you had, and it kind of all came together and converged there. But this kind of runs in your blood and as a family thing that you didn't even know about until you started going down that journey.
Yeah, I kind of knew my great-grandfather was a craftsman, but I didn't really know the extent of it until later in life. And then I realized that he was a boat builder in Germany.
Wow.
And then he moved over here where there wasn't really a big demand for boats.
Yeah.
So he became a home builder, and he built entire neighborhoods basically by hand.
Wow.
And actually, it's funny that you bring it up, because we just were visiting my grandmother last weekend, and we drove through the old neighborhood that he built, and the homes are just incredible to this day.
Wow.
So there was him, and then I guess his whole family essentially were all craftsmen, woodworkers. And so, yeah, it was funny. I didn't learn that until I was already 5 or 6 years into my career as a luthier, but it does run in the family.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
To say that it's a legacy that you're carrying on that you didn't even know you were picking up from your grandfather and other generations. So you make this pivot from Penn State into luthier school. You then become an apprentice, and you begin that with Brian Gallup, but then you go on to go even deeper with Tom Lebecki, who is another really well-known luthier and well-known for, I think he does some of that laser cut and inlay. Is that him?
No, not Tom.
Okay.
Tom's all handmade.
Okay.
We and even in our more intricate inlay work, we would hire an inlay artist named Larry Robinson, who's all handcrafted. But yeah, Tom is part of this era of luthiers that is referred to as the golden era of luthiery.
Yeah.
And they're kind of this group of people who are mostly still alive and working, but they're sort of the oldest of us. And they really codified the industry as a boutique, boutique handcrafted thing.
Yeah.
And they existed in a time where there was no internet, there was no cell phone. There weren't really any luthiery books.
Right.
There were no schools.
Yeah.
They were all kind of dispersed and shooting in the dark, and they had these wacky ideas. They failed a lot, and they kind of are responsible for pushing the instrument to the point where we are now, which is a highly refined virtuoso style instrument.
Yeah.
And so Tom was one of those people, very well known, very highly regarded, probably in the top 5, top 10 archtop guitar builders in the world today.
Yeah.
And so I worked for him for a little under 6 years as his shop foreman, and that was really where I cut my teeth. I mean, the Gallup experience was where I learned the foundational knowledge and everything, but working for Tom is really where I learned how to build world-class instruments on a schedule with deadlines, with pressure, and keep the quality up and everything.
That's crazy. I've tinkered with the concept of building guitars. I'm still on number 1. It's been 10 years of acoustic building, but it surprised me. One of the things that I found fascinating as I looked at this, I think it was Cupliano was one of the first guys to do a book on luthiery. And back in the 70s, I mean, there's this transition of, if you were buying guitars before that, it was probably Gretsch or Gibson or Martin or Fender coming, of course, in the 50s. But for most of those, it was factory style building. And there was this resurgence of artisan building in the 70s. You're talking about Rebecki there, and he was one of the forerunners of that. How most people, when they think about it, they go, well, guitar is a guitar is a guitar. And what's the difference between a $300 guitar and a $3,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 guitar? Sometimes you can see some of the artisan work when it comes to inlays and beauty and design, but a lot of people look at it and go, well, isn't it all just wood? Isn't it just people working there? Why is there such a difference in that space?
Well, the differences are certainly nuanced. So a lot of people, if they haven't trained their ear, or they don't really have a nuanced appreciation of the instrument or anything, they may not notice some of the differences. I learned back at Penn State when I was studying fine art, one of the things I learned was that art appreciation is also a learned skill. And so if you have not developed an appreciation of fine art, you may not appreciate the difference between a Rembrandt and a comic book.
Right.
So the guitars are similar. The differences are nuanced. I would say there's a few main differences. One is the experience of buying the instrument.
Okay.
When you commission a instrument from someone like myself, it's a months-long process that you are involved in.
Yeah.
You're telling me, you're using me as a conduit basically for your vision.
Okay.
I have the skills and the knowledge. You have this need or this vision that you would like to see in an instrument.
Right.
And so there's a constant communication process going on to make that happen.
Yeah.
And that's a really cool experience. I mean, it's kind of a one in a lifetime sort of experience.
Yeah.
The other thing is tonally, a lot of my clients are professional musicians or they are collectors who have very refined taste in terms of how instruments should sound and feel.
Yeah.
And they're just not going to get that from a factory made instrument because the business model of factory building just does not allow for the time and the individual attention to be put into each instrument to make that happen. The thing is that wood is not, every piece of wood is different on a mechanical level.
Yeah.
So what my training allows me to do is take every single individual piece of wood and make an instrument based on what that wood is telling me, and maximize that wood.
Yeah.
And the business model of a factory is just, there's no place for that.
Yeah. There's some kind of quality control, but it's a baseline of like, well, it's just got to meet this standard. And then they're going to treat every piece of wood universally the same as they go through that process.
Yeah. They take everything to certain measurements. They have template. They have a template, you know, and basically it's a numbers game. It's like if a factory pumps out 100,000 guitars, you're going to have a certain portion of those that are just total crap.
Yeah.
You're going to have a certain portion that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And you're going to have a portion that's really good.
Yeah.
And you go into a store and you play them until you find the really good one and you're good. But with us, every instrument we put out, the intention is to make it one of the best instruments on the planet.
Right.
And you just can't really do that without the handcrafted part of it.
Right. Absolutely. And I've played your guitars. I've played other Luthiery guitars, and I own a Taylor. I love my Taylor. It's what I got when I was 18, and I've had it for, this year will be 20 years since it was finished at the Taylor shop. But I went through that process. I played hundreds of different Taylors and Martins and Breedloves, and till I found that one that I went, this is the tone, this is the feel, this is how I want it to sound. And yet sit down with a Santa Cruz guitar, or sit down with one of your guitars, of course, or other Luthiers, and you just go, all of a sudden it's like, wow, there's something unlocked here that's a little bit, it's special compared to what I have.
Yeah. I don't look at what I do as, like, I'm not building products in my mind. I'm building pieces.
Yeah.
And each piece is specifically tailored to a client and is specifically tailored to the wood and the material that's in that piece. Yeah. And, I've never poo-pooed factory-made instruments.
Right.
I mean, they have a place. Not everybody's going to... not everybody's going to spend $10,000, $20,000 on an instrument, but there is a definitely a noticeable difference.
Right. Absolutely. Now you have three models that are kind of your core models. You've got the Church, Steel City, and then an OM, which is your standard acoustic style guitar versus archtop. As a builder, you're doing different styles. You're building different things. How do you process building an archtop versus an acoustic, a standard, traditional acoustic flat top guitar? How do you view that when you're building and approaching it? What are the skills that are different?
Well, first of all, my archtops are, I put a priority on building acoustic archtops. So all my instruments are acoustic.
Right.
They can be amplified and everything, but a lot of archtop builders are building essentially electric, hollow-bodied electric guitars.
Yeah.
I want all my instruments to be acoustically viable instruments from the get-go.
Okay.
The arch top is a different beast from the flat top steel string, and it is a different beast to play, and it is definitely a different beast to make. The biggest difference for me is the arch top is more sculptural, so it's kind of more of a visceral experience building.
So you're
it.
carving it, you're shaping it with planes, and whereas a flat top, it's basically you're joining two pieces of wood and then getting the right thickness and then bracing it right.
Yeah, the flat top is all about the bracing on the inside, because it's basically a membrane. Your top and your back are just membranes, flat membranes.
Yeah. And
then you're doing all of your voicing on the brace work.
Okay.
Whereas the arch top, you start with a 3/4 inch thick piece of wood and you sculpt it down to the carve, and then you have a graduated thickness that you take from the inside.
Okay.
And most of your voicing comes from that carve and that thickness, the differentiating of the thickness from like the center to the outside rim.
Yeah.
So the thinking about the two from a voicing point of view is completely different.
Okay.
The arch top, I feel like in my mind, is more of a 3-dimensional process of voicing.
Yeah.
Whereas the flat top is more of a 2-dimensional process.
Oh, okay.
Fundamentally, the theories behind voicing are kind of the same.
Yeah.
You're trying to manage kinetic energy, and you're trying to manage the decay and the motion of that energy through the system.
Okay.
But the way that you do that in each type of instrument is different.
How are you finding purpose in what you're doing? Or do you?
I do and I don't. I mean, there have been times in my life where I've thought building instruments was kind of selfish, because it's very much about me.
Yeah.
And like, I just love to do it, you know. And I'm just hoping to find people who are
so
willing
you
to
find
pay me.
you find that fulfillment personally of like, I just love it.
Yeah, I really do just love building instruments. I love the challenge. I love the intellectual aspects of it, the creative aspects of it. I mean, it's very fulfilling to me personally, just the process of doing it. But I mean, in a bigger sense, I do think that, going back to kind of my political philosophy and my interest in the Industrial Revolution and all that, I do think that craftsmanship and quality goods are important to society. Yeah. And I think that we have really shifted away from that in many ways. And I'm hoping that on some level, I'm contributing to the conversation of why well-crafted things are important, why art is important, and, trying to just put into the world the most high quality and beautiful stuff that I can in my short period of time here. Yeah. I don't know that it's doing anything, but my hope is that is a positive impact.
Yeah. Yeah. We were talking before we got on, and we're going to go a little bit deeper into that in segment 2 about you're navigating the complexities of the business side of Luthiery, and it is a very interesting time in musical instrument manufacturing. I mean, we've seen Gibson not doing so well, which is just crazy to think, Yeah. So what is one challenge that you're working to overcome in the business?
The biggest challenge for me personally has just been cash flow and like working capital. Okay. I've bootstrapped my business. I don't have any credit cards. I've never taken any debt. I've built my business with cash, and it's really hard. Yeah. There's a lot of machines to buy. The material's expensive. And it's a feast or famine business. You don't, at least on the building end, repair work is different. And I'll get into that in a second. But from the standpoint of building instruments, you kind of have these big paydays with long periods of time with no income. Wow. And so trying to balance a business that's where you have constant expenses, but these intermittent bursts of revenue is challenging.
Yeah. Now, for you, you are doing so many different things. We're going to talk more about that in segment 2 and how the entrepreneurial picture is so much bigger than Luthiery for you. You're doing other things. But what's the next big goal you have for the business or businesses you're running?
Well, since I started my business in 2013, I've basically been designing it all as I go.
Okay.
So I've been designing my instruments as I go. I've been designing my business model as I go, all my branding. And I've gotten to a point now where I feel like I have enough of that under my belt that I am now trying to identify problems and then solve those problems.
Okay.
So the next phase for me is kind of a revamping of my business from the ground up.
Yeah.
Because now when I started my business, all I knew how to do was build guitars. I didn't know how to do all the other stuff that's involved.
And no one tells you that that you have to do the other stuff too. It's like it comes along with the deal.
Yeah, and I do really enjoy it. I mean, I like the art of building a business.
Okay.
But I found that a lot of creative people are kind of business averse.
Okay.
They don't want to, they kind of got into creative careers because they didn't want to deal with all that stuff. And then you find out that you can't not deal with that stuff.
Right.
If you want to be successful, you have to know how to do your bookkeeping, and you have to know how to do inventory and marketing and sales and all that stuff. So I actually really enjoy it, but I didn't really know what I was doing for the first few years. So now I kind of know what I'm doing. I sort of know what I want my business to look like, and I'm going through this process of identifying problems and solving those problems. And an example is creating more process in what I do.
Okay.
Because up until this point, it's been very one-off. Every instrument I make, it's like I'm making it for the first time.
Okay.
But I'm not. I've made a bunch of church models, and there's no reason I should be measuring this thing anymore. It should just be automatic.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the next big goal for me, is to build some efficiency into all my processes.
Very cool. We'll be right back with Stuart Day, going deeper into the broader picture of his entrepreneurial journey, talking a little bit about some of the reset he's doing with the business and where he's going next. Today's episode is being sponsored by our friends over at Mighty Travels and OpportunityInChina.com. Here is a little bit more about our friends over at Mighty Travels. I don't know about you, but I love to travel. I just don't like looking through all the websites to find the right fares to the right locations that I want to travel to. Well, our friends over at MightyTravels.com are helping you get better rates to the places you want to travel, often saving up to $190 per ticket. You should check out MightyTravels.com/JumbleThink to learn more about how you can use their service to get the right trips booked for you at incredible rates. So swing on over, check it out, MightyTravels.com/JumbleThink. We also want to thank our friends over at OpportunityInChina.com for sponsoring today's episode. Have you been looking for a way to change your career or social prospects? Do you see the world around you changing and haven't quite figured out what path you should take? Well, you are not alone in seeking opportunity. Visit OpportunityInChina.com for access to scholarships to attend university in China, or if you have a bachelor's degree already, OpportunityInChina.com provides access in jobs in the educational sector all across China. Now, working in China is not only often well paid, but it will place you among 1/5 of the world's population, boosting your social network, bringing you more deeply into the story of globalization, and opening up doors you never knew existed. Seize your opportunity now. Visit their website for more information at OpportunityInChina.com. By the way, they have a great podcast. Simply search for Opportunity in China podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. Now let's jump back into today's episode. We are back with Stuart Day. We are going to talk more about entrepreneurship, more about the art of Luthiery, and some of the new innovations happening. But before we do that, how can people find you?
Well, I'm on Instagram, Stuart Day Guitars, stuartdayguitars.com, and Stuart Day Guitars on Facebook. I don't do Twitter, but
good. You don't want it.
the Instagram is probably my favorite platform.
Yeah,
especially for what I do. It's just a very visual thing. So
I won't lie. I've spent way too much time on your Instagram feed on some days, just going. Yeah, when I get the money, that's what I want. I've been studying jazz guitar lately, taking lessons on that and trying to actually become a real guitar player. And I'm like, I got to get the church and plug that into my amp one day. And
you definitely need it.
Yeah, I need it. I want it. It's coming one day.
Yeah. I also have a YouTube channel. It's kind of geared more towards other luthiers and craft people, but I try to put some content up there for everybody once in a while.
Yeah, super cool. If you're not a guitar player, if you are a guitar player, if you are a woodworker, it's definitely an Instagram feed to follow along with, because it is beyond the art of guitar building. It is the art of beauty is what you're building. And in the posts you capture, you were just sharing this week about restoring a very broken Gibson guitar. The headstock snapped off, and showing some pictures in that process. And it's amazing how what you're doing is not only building new things, but also restoring legacies of finely built guitars that have seen better days.
Yeah.
And so
repair and restoration is a big part. And that, getting into repair was probably the first, what I would consider entrepreneurial decision that I made, because I was building and I was really struggling. I was having some success here and there, but I was really struggling to put it all together. And, I was lucky in my career that I had the opportunities to work for the people that I worked for.
Yeah.
So repair work was never like a necessity for me. I never had to take on repair work because I was always getting a paycheck building.
Yeah.
And when I was doing my own business and I was kind of struggling, I was like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And then I was just like, wait a minute. I was trained in repair work too. So I started really focusing on about 50% of my time on repair and restoration.
Yeah.
And it completely turned everything around, because repair work is a much more stable revenue stream than building.
Yeah.
And I've also learned to love it. I mean, I really it's kind of more of a detective work. You have to reverse engineer a lot of things. You're working with other people's designs, and you're trying to figure out how to fix it within the context of their intention.
Yeah.
And so it's a totally different mindset, and it's really made me a better luthier all around.
Yeah.
And it kind of stabilized my business. So
and that seems like an interesting story for you, is that there are those guys and ladies. You have a good friend, Megan Wells, I think. She's a killer luthier doing some really cool stuff too. And that's been really fascinating to see the emergence of women into this industry and their passion for that. But a lot of these people who have done it maybe for a long time, or have a clientele that are built up, they just go on autopilot. And they stop learning. They stop evolving and growing. But for you, it seems like that's part of the lifeblood of what you're doing.
Absolutely. And it's not always the best business decision. Like, it's not always best for business to keep growing. You would think, like, in an ideal world, that you would want your business owners to constantly be innovating, but sometimes it's advantageous to just find what works and stick with it.
Yeah.
But for me, I have a really hard time doing that. I always want to find ways to make my instruments better, to make my practice better, my business better. And so I'm always looking to innovate and learn and incorporate new ideas. Very important to me.
What are some of the new ideas? I remember at wrong event, Artisan Show in Harrisburg. I was looking at like some of your tailpieces. on the guitar and going, what in the world is this? Because you were doing some crazy thing, not crazy, they were really cool things with aging, not aging, but almost like turning them into petrified wood or something like that.
Oh yeah, so this is really cool for all woodworkers. One of the new trends right now is using a lot of resin, epoxy resin.
Okay.
And if you go on Instagram and you follow a bunch of woodworkers, you will see ad nauseum people pouring these resin tabletops, right?
Yeah,
and,
it's on my instant feed all the time.
Yeah, it's becoming like a little overdone, I think. But in any case, resin and epoxy have really advanced in the last 10 years. So now we are able to impregnate woods that were previously would not really have been usable in woodworking.
Okay.
But we can now impregnate them with resin and sometimes dyes and colors and things.
Yeah.
And we can now use them as stable material. So like a lot of like punky sort of rotted woods, which previous generations of woodworkers would have thrown away. We're now able to use. And the cool thing about that is that a lot of these woods that are not necessarily the most stable alone are some of the coolest looking pieces of wood. So yeah, I have been into vacuum impregnating burls and other less stable woods with dyes and resins for a while, and using them as decorative pieces. I've also started getting back into hand rubbed bursts.
Oh, okay.
So it's like a sunburst is how we color the instrument.
Yeah.
For most of my career, I would just spray the sunburst with an air gun.
Yeah.
But I've started getting into like alcohol staining, which is what they used to do way back in the day. And I find that it makes it interacts with the figure in the wood much differently, and it kind of makes everything look more three-dimensional.
Yeah.
There's less margin for error because you're actually putting the dye into the wood instead of on top of the lacquer.
It's painting versus staining.
Yeah. So you have to be a little bit more careful, and you have to have a little better surface prep before you start. There's some extra steps involved, but I really like that. And that's a great example of something that I, said, like, what I was doing was fine. There was nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
But I want to try something else.
Yeah. And it gives you a different result, a different tool in your arsenal of approaches on how you can solve that client's desire and goals for a specific look or style. I want to pivot here. I love talking about guitars. We'll probably talk a little bit more about it in a few minutes, but you, one of the definitions of entrepreneurship is a person that sees opportunity and builds something new. And you do that with your journey. You are diversifying your career. You're still doing Luthiery. That's going to be a part of your story probably as long as you're alive.
Yes.
But you are diversifying and doing other endeavors too. Tell us a little bit about that pivot and what that looks like.
Well, I don't really know how it all started, other than just my personality is, like you said, I'm always kind of looking to either solve problems or find opportunities. So the first thing was that my father and I kind of co-founded a marketing firm.
Right.
Being an instrument maker, I had to do all my own marketing, branding, photography, video, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So over the years, I jumped into all of that with the same passion as I did building instruments. And I started to get hired for projects like video and marketing projects. And my dad has 40 years of experience at the VP level of sales, marketing, and product development.
Okay.
And so he wanted to do his own company. He didn't want to work for anyone else anymore. He wanted to consult.
Yeah.
And I said, well, why don't I just do the creative part of it, the photography, the video. So we've worked for Fortune 500 companies. We were down in Memphis shooting this $500 million facility.
Wow.
And we did a week's worth of shooting. We've made a bunch of different videos, websites, things like that. So that's been picking up steam. I've been doing more work on that end of things. And it was actually a project that we did for that company, where down in Memphis, that facility, the company, we were down there to shoot kind of like a promotional series of videos for what they were doing.
Yeah.
And on our way back, on the flight back, the head up in the company decided he was going to sell the factory.
Wow.
So he came to us and said, "Can you take everything you did and turn it into like a sales presentation for the actual facility?" So we did that, and what we put together actually ended up helping get the facility sold very quickly. And that kind of was a light bulb in my head. Like, if I had my real estate license, if I had been involved in that industry, it would have been a completely different picture for me. Instead of making a couple $1,000s, I would have made a lot of money. So I started getting interested in real estate. I got my real estate license in Pennsylvania, and my goal, I'm now in the process of kind of building that business. The goal being to do sort of what we do on the marketing end for companies, and do the same thing for luxury real estate and commercial real estate, with the long-term strategy being to get involved in investing in my own real estate eventually. And then the other thing that I'm involved with is small-scale regenerative farming. My fiance and I have become very interested in that. What
does that mean, regenerative farming?
So you have your conventional model of farming, which is sort of your industrial ag. And there's a lot of problems associated with that. Regenerative farming takes a different approach. It basically says we do not have to deplete the ecology to get food. We can actually create systems and work with evolutionary processes in order to have agriculture actually have a net positive impact on the local ecology. So by improving soil health, by improving the way that water flows on a piece of land, things like that. And so I've become very fascinated. It's actually, there's a lot of parallels between that and instrument making. They're both these very complex, dynamic system kind of approaches. And I think I just really like that kind of stuff.
That's super cool. I know for us, we don't drink the water here. We get bottled water, which we hate doing bottled water, but we don't trust it here with the amount of chemicals going into the ground. And that's outside of our control, because, we don't farm the fields and we don't want to. So
we have 87 acres of organic farm land in Western Pennsylvania. And we haven't really started yet. We're still in the business planning phase of it all. But we think that there's kind of an untapped market near us, and we think that the world's kind of moving in that direction. People are starting to wake up and kind of care about what they're eating and where it's coming from and how it's made. And we have a lot of environmental issues to solve. And I think that agriculture has kind of, in some ways, rightly been pointed at as a big problem. But I don't think it has to be that way. I think agriculture can actually be a solution as well. If you use the correct model.
And it's shocking to me. We've both lived in Northern California, and I have good friends that have lived down in Nashville and other places, of course, across the country. And with the amount of agriculture in Pennsylvania and the amount of resources, it's amazing how far behind they are when it comes to some of these approaches that we saw in California, and just the quality of food, the quality of flavor. I remember tasting a corn out there that was like, wow, this is what it was like when I was a kid. And it was because we've changed our methods so much to maximize yield and forgotten about taking care of the resource. So that's super exciting. It's cool that you're doing that. Why diversify what you're doing in entrepreneurship when you've done so much to build the Luthiery space? Because I imagine that the Luthiery stuff doesn't get as much time and attention as it used to.
And that was the hardest decision, really. But it really came down to, is it most important to me to just be a full-time guitar maker? Or is it most important to me to find a way to do that and still give myself and my family like a decent quality of life? It's very hard to run a financially successful and viable career in Luthiery.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter how successful you get. And this is kind of an epiphany of mine. As I grew in Luthiery, I got to know these people like Tom Rebecki, that era of makers who I always looked up to as these heroes. I got to know them personally.
Yeah.
And I got to see more often than not that many of these people who had these very successful Luthiery careers were now getting older and closer to retirement, and they didn't know how they were going to do that.
Wow.
Because they were just kind of struggling financially. And that was sort of a frightening moment for me, because I just started to think, well, if you're in that position and I'm trying to be you,
I don't want to be you.
Yeah. So it just made me realize that there's some inherent instability issues in Luthiery, and I actually think in all creative careers.
Yeah.
And I don't think that means they can't be careers.
Right.
But I do think you need to take a page out of like Warren Buffett's book, and you need to diversify your revenue.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where I started to think about this. Like, maybe by focusing my attention in some other places to diversify my revenue streams, I can stabilize my financial life a little bit. And the byproduct is that I can remove some of the financial burden from my instruments, which also allows me to, I think, do more of the things that I want to do in my instruments as well.
Yeah. You're not put into a corner in which you have to take the project any longer, but that you can choose what you're doing and where you want to go with Luthiery. So tell us a little bit about your journey of building this business. You are diversifying now, but how are you balancing all that you're doing? What are the habits that you reinforce to make sure that you say, I want to build the lifestyle I want for my family and for everything that we're doing, but you're doing so many different things. How do you find that quality of life that you want in the chaos of being so diversified with many things?
Well, right now I'm not, because I am sort of in that like transitional period where I'm still trying to build all these things.
Yeah.
So, I know what it was like to build my Luthiery business, and I can see that I'm sort of in that same spot.
Startup mode.
Yeah. So right now it is crazy. I just have no time for anything. The big thing for me is like block scheduling and just like keeping on top of time management.
Okay.
And trying to just find little spaces during the day where I can unplug my head for 10 minutes and but right now it's mostly I see the light at the end of the tunnel. I know where I want to be, and I know if I get through this period of craziness that it will be better and I can balance things a little bit more. Yeah. It's the same thing though when I started repairing guitars. I was very concerned that if I started repairing, I would never have the time to build.
Right.
But I made it work. I just created a schedule. I stuck to it. I managed the time well, and I just made sure that I was building in efficient processes. And to me, that's the biggest thing is process.
Yeah.
Like if you're trying to do a million things, but none of those things have a repeatable, efficient process, then you're going to spin your wheels. You're going to always be behind. But if you can build in intelligent, efficient processes, then I think you can get a lot done in a period of time that seems almost unrealistic,
Yeah. We always do a rapid fire segment. We're going to do that in a minute, but I want to do a Luthier rapid fire segment with you that are Luthier questions to see what you think.
Okay.
So the first question is, what's your favorite material or wood to build with?
Oh, I think maple. Okay. Maple is a vastly underrated wood for instruments. We use it a lot in arch tops, but it's not so popular in other instruments, and it's just a very balanced, very beautiful wood.
What is the one innovation in Luthiery? We've got armrests, we've got slope back stuff where you have the V style, you have different things when it comes to innovations on cutaways, all kinds of cool things going on material wise with resources and having to rethink. What's the one trend that you go, I dig this?
Well, we're seeing more embrace of man-made materials now. So like carbon fibers. There's a material called Rocklight, which is a composite material that replaces ebony.
Yeah.
And as we are having more problems with the sourcing of timber, we're going to have to start embracing these materials more.
Okay.
Now, I'm not going to go as far as say that instruments should be all carbon fiber, but as certain structural elements and things, we are, as an industry, embracing those things more now, and I think that's a good thing.
If you were to look back and tell a luthier that's coming up the ranks, saying, hey, I want to be a builder. I want to build beautiful things. I love doing this. What would be the recommendation to give them?
I think that there was a time when you could just build a little shop in your garage and teach yourself and make it work. I think those days are over.
Okay.
It's just the level of skill and the caliber of instruments these days is so high that you've really got to go get an education in luthiery. You've got to do an apprenticeship. You've got to work with somebody who knows what they're doing. So I would say just find one of the luthiery schools and go do that.
If you were to bring a new model into your arsenal of models, what would it be?
I actually have a design that I have not had a chance to implement yet, and it is a very experimental sort of deconstructed electric instrument.
Yeah.
So I would probably add that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Like that. If you were to have all the freedom in the world to do what you want in luthiery, what's the one thing you'd do?
I would build a dream shop.
It's always the shop, right?
Yeah. And I would like to create a new model for apprenticeship.
Okay.
Because I think what apprenticeship has been up until this point has been really focused on just learning the craft itself.
Okay.
And there's been very little attention paid to the business part of it.
Yeah.
And so I have this idea that would, you would have the learning of the craft part that would work with basically you starting your business while being my apprentice. And I would help you with the marketing. I would help you with the financial part of it. We would create a bank account for you.
Yeah.
Any instruments that you sold while you were my apprentice, you would only get a certain percentage of what you made, and the other percentage would go into your startup fund.
Cool.
So I think there's a more structured, long-term way to create an apprenticeship. And I would, if I had the ability now, I would be implementing that.
That's super cool because I think that a lot of our modern methods of education, while well-intended, don't do the job justice. And especially around entrepreneurship and startup, you get an MBA from a college or university, and you leave not really having a sense of what real business is about. And so we're not teaching people, especially entrepreneurs, effectively. And I think that that new approach would be super cool around luthiery.
Yeah, I mean, I think, skilled trades, before we really had like universities, we had the trade guilds.
Right.
And I don't think people today realize what a great job they did at educating.
Yeah.
And it was a very structured educational system. Some skilled trades still do, like the Carpenters Union and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's really, you're learning while you're working.
Right.
And that's the key difference.
Yeah.
You're in the job already.
Yeah.
And you're learning and you're getting paid. And, I think it's a really good way to do it.
I know for me as a web developer and an agency owner, my best developers a lot of times weren't the people that got their teeth into code in universities. Now, a lot of them went to universities and a lot of them learned great things that added benefit, but they would have coded whether they went to school or not.
Right.
And they were learning while they were doing all the time whereas a lot of times these principles are taught without the application of real world experience. And so that marriage of head knowledge with actual experiential knowledge, I think we need to bring that back into education more as a well-rounded experience.
Yeah, I agree. A couple years ago, I did a lecture at University of Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
They have an annual like tech and entrepreneur conference, and I actually followed somebody from Google, which is like a highlight of my career.
Yeah.
I was like, wow. My talk was all about what can modern entrepreneurs and tech-driven people learn from craftsmanship.
Wow.
And I think there's a lot of lessons in craft work and trade work that could benefit people who would otherwise not really pay attention to that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The thing is that trades, we've been doing what we do for hundreds of years, and we have a lot of collective wisdom about how to educate people, how to work. And I think in our modern society, we sometimes don't like to give a lot of credit to skilled trades and for what they've accomplished in human history. And I think there's a lot of lessons there that could be useful.
Yeah. And I think that we're at a point now where people are saying that the elite model of elitism has to stop because it's not really benefiting people. And we got to do this together. And I think that's the power of education, is that, as a good friend of mine said, you can always learn what to do and what not to do from me. And I think often it's easy to get into the place of saying, no, I've got this figured out. But even the best skilled person can learn from somebody coming up who has a fresh approach or a fresh set of eyes and solves a problem that the other person had never even thought about. As we wrap up this segment, I want to make sure to remind people again how they can find you. So how can they find and connect with you?
My website is stuartdayguitars.com. They can find me at Stuart Day Guitars on Facebook and Instagram, and Stuart Day Guitars on YouTube.
We will be right back with Rapid Fire Questions with Stuart Day. Here at JumbleThink, our heartbeat is to help you turn your dreams and ideas into reality. One of the ways we do that is through this podcast. But we'd also love to connect with you and have you connect with our tribe on Facebook and Instagram. Simply go to jumblethink.com/Facebook or jumblethink.com/Instagram to connect with us, to become friends or followers. We want to have your voice become part of these episodes. So what we're doing is we're letting you know about upcoming guests so you can ask us to ask your questions directly to our guests. So swing on over to facebook.com/jumblethink or jumblethink.com/Instagram to go right to our page, right to where you can follow and like us. We also want to take a moment to pause and thank our sponsors for today's episode, Mighty Travels and OpportunityInChina.com. Here's a little bit more from our friends over at OpportunityInChina.com.
At the dawn of the 19th century, forward-thinking people moved to the commercial centers of Europe. Moving into the 20th century, America welcomed millions into the land of freedom and opportunity. It is now the 21st century. Many of the successes and fortunes of our generations will be made in China. To learn how you can seize opportunity in China, follow the Opportunity in China podcast. The Opportunity in China podcast is available anywhere podcasts are streamed, or you can visit our website at opportunityinchina.com.
We also want to thank our friends over at Mighty Travels. Here's a little bit more from them. How much time do you spend looking for the right flight for your trip? Do you spend hours searching all of the different travel websites only to find out that once you booked your ticket, you missed out on a better price? Well, our friends over at Mighty Travels are here to help you. They want to make sure that you get notifications in real time so that you can score the best tickets at the best price, saving on average $190 per ticket. Well, they are doing cool stuff, so you want to make sure to check them out. Swing on over to mightytravels.com/jumblethink. That's mightytravels.com/jumblethink to learn more about how they can help you know when the best fares are hitting the market so you can grab them up before they're gone. Now let's return to the conversation with Stuart Day for our rapid fire questions.
Pour mettre l'aiguille sur le disque.
We are back with Stuart Day. Stuart, are you ready for rapid fire questions?
I think I'm ready.
Okay. As a child, what did you want to do when you grew up?
Oh, I was really into marine biology.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a big thing when we were probably kids. I remember the same thing.
We grew up in San Diego, so that
helps.
I always loved the ocean, and yeah.
What is one tip you'd give someone with a big idea or dream and they don't know where to start?
Just put one foot in front of the other. Find something to start.
Yeah.
And don't waste your time trying to make the beginning perfect.
What's one big lie about entrepreneurship you want to break?
I don't know. I hate the line, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. I don't know if that really applies to entrepreneurship, but it's just not true.
Yeah.
You'll work 5 times harder, but the difference will be that you're building a life on your terms. You enjoy what you do. It's meaningful.
Yeah. What is one change you'd like to see in the world?
Can I give you 2?
Yeah.
I'll give you a practical one and then a philosophical one.
All right.
My practical change is I would like to see funds and capital more available to entrepreneurs, small business owners, people with big dreams and good ideas. I think there's a lot of really hardworking, visionary people with great ideas out there, and they just cannot get past the fact that they don't have the money to get it going.
Yeah.
And I think that's it's a sad thing for those people.
Yeah.
Kind of tragic, but I think it's also sad for us as a society because we may be losing out on a lot of good things. You know? So I'd make funding more available, and then the second thing I would change is I would like to rebuild the bridge that we once had between consumers and the production chain. I think we've become very divorced from what it means to make things, where things come from, where the materials come from. And I think that causes a lot of issues.
Yeah. Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. And
yeah.
What do you want your legacy to be?
I don't think much about legacy. I hope that I just am seen as a fair, kind person who contributed positively to other people's lives and who, did good work.
Yeah. What inspires you?
Everything. Other people really inspire me. Failures, successes. From a design standpoint, I get a lot of inspiration from fashion and architecture, photography. And, I don't know, I have this internal drive to do well, and I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to change up this question a little bit. Typically ask, what is one book that every dreamer or entrepreneur should read? You can answer that if you want, but beyond that, what is one book that you think anyone who is interested in the art of luthiery or building guitars or instruments should check out?
I think a really great book is called The Complete Guitar Repair by Hideo Kamimoto. It's a repair-oriented book. It's not going to teach you how to build instruments, but it's just one of those books that are kind of foundational to an understanding of luthiery. And as far as entrepreneurship, there's a book I read a couple years ago I really liked called, I think it was called Uncertainty.
Okay.
I can't remember the author off the top of my head, but that reframed a lot of things for me in a good way.
How do you define success?
Having the freedom to build a life that's on your terms and not sort of predefined for you, just following your interests, things that are important to you, your values and ethics, and finding a way to build financial freedom to live that life.
Yeah. Now, I asked about the world of luthiery earlier, about one trend that excites you, but in the broader scope of life and culture and innovation, what's one trend you're currently excited about?
Well, the regenerative farming trend is really exciting. Yeah. That is a growing trend that I'm seeing pop up in larger areas where people are starting to become knowledgeable about the fact that agriculture and the environment go hand in hand. And how we grow food really is going to dictate whether we help or hurt the environment. And the ways that we can grow food in a helpful way also happen to be the ways that produce the better tasting, healthier food. So it's kind of a win-win. And I think that trend, I'm seeing a lot of signs that trend is picking up. And also just in the last 5 or so years, I've noticed a trend of younger people getting really interested in craft work and skilled trades. I think that's a great trend.
Yeah, it's definitely something I'm seeing, is that people are saying, hey, I don't need as much stuff, but the stuff I do have, I want it to be awesome.
Yes.
And I want it to be something that matters. It's something I connect with either emotionally or find it beautiful or whatever it is. And we're seeing that in the return to craftsmen in so many different spaces.
You know, that what you just said kind of reminds me, there's been this long idea that Americans are kind of too materialistic. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And I actually, and this is not my idea, I heard this, but I can't remember where I heard this from. But the idea that we are actually not materialistic enough.
Okay.
In the sense that a true materialist actually cares deeply about the material things in their life, and they're connected to them, and they don't buy things compulsively. They buy things intentionally with forethought. And we actually need more of that.
Yeah.
What we need less of is kind of this compulsive, low quality consumption of products and goods. And so this idea that we should actually be more materialistic in the sense that we should care more about the products that we are interacting with and the objects that we're bringing into our lives.
Yeah, I was watching a documentary that talked a little bit about this from the standpoint of different cultures. And they talked about, in America, we like to buy cheap stuff made cheaply that doesn't last. Mm-hmm. Whereas like in a lot of Asian cultures, they like to buy American products that are handmade, handcrafted, high quality, that are going to last for generations to come. And so it's a perspective and a philosophical change in how people approach what they consume and how they consume it and why they're consuming it.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yes.
As you're approaching entrepreneurship, what's one habit that you're finding that is significant to your journey of entrepreneurship?
Well, the fact that I'm always kind of, I'm not very afraid of failure.
Okay.
I don't necessarily believe in failure. I think it's just, and this may come from the training I've had in craft work, where you're just always growing, you're always learning. Yeah. And, something doesn't work out this time, it'll work out better the next time.
Yeah.
And so I think that quality that I have has helped me a lot in accomplishing the things that I've accomplished, that I just am not that afraid to fail.
Wow. I think that's a really powerful tool, because the fear of failure holds back people from ever starting.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can get over or redefine failure as a stepping stone to success, it really helps you redefine that journey of like, okay, this didn't work the way I expected, or it didn't work out right. Now, where do I go from here? And use that as a tool and a mechanism to move forward.
Yeah. And it's hard. And it gets harder when you have a family and you have people counting on you and everything.
Yeah.
It's hard to maintain that perspective, but I do believe in it. And I think it's really important.
What is one thing you wish you would have known when you started out?
How hard it was going to be.
Everyone says it's overnight, right? It's a garage startup. You're going to be a billionaire by tomorrow.
Yeah, it's definitely hard. I think if I could go back and kind of teach myself something, it would be financial literacy. I think we do a terrible job of teaching kids financial literacy.
Yeah.
I didn't really have anybody that really taught me those things. I've had to kind of struggle to learn them the hard way in my adult life. And if I would have known, like just something simple like compound interest and how that can make you a lot of money, if you start young enough.
Yeah. I
didn't know that kind of stuff, and I wish I would have.
If you weren't doing what you're doing today, what do you think you'd be doing?
I may have gone into biology. I really like working with animals. And,
okay.
I just like nature, and I find it fascinating.
What is one dream you're still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
I think I don't have any room on my plate for more dreams. I think just getting the things that I'm working on now, just to the point where they are working the way I know they can.
Yeah.
Is probably my biggest dream at this point. Because if I can do that, then everything else is open up to me.
Yeah.
So I'd say just getting everything on my plate right now where I know it could be.
Super, super cool. As we wrap up today's episode, we want to give you a moment to leave us with a final thought for our listeners. So what would you want to tell them if they were sitting in this room?
I think I've believed this for a long time, and actually, as I've started working in real estate, it's only become reiterated to me. We need to do a better job of paying attention to quality and craftsmanship in our world.
Yeah.
I think we've forgotten how important that is, and I just would encourage people to, if you have something that you're gonna buy coming up, a new coffee table or something, I would encourage you to seek out local craftspeople who are experts at what they do and commission a piece, because it's an incredible experience. You will get a product that is vastly superior to anything you'll buy in a big box store. You will create less waste in doing so. You will support a family. You will improve your community. And I think that just having that consciousness shift back to skilled trades and highly crafted goods would be a good thing for everybody.
Super cool. Stuart, thanks so much for taking time out to be with us today, share your story, give us insights into the world of entrepreneurship, and, of course, the amazing things you're doing in Luthiery.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. So it was a lot of fun.
I want to thank today's guest, Stuart Day, for taking time out and being on the podcast. Make sure to check out what he's doing. It is really cool, and his work is beautiful. You can find those links in the episode notes, probably right below where you're listening right now. We also want to thank our sponsors for today, Mighty Travels and OpportunityInChina.com. They're doing great stuff. Go check them out and connect with them too. As we wrap up today's episode, my final thought for you is this. Go build something. Have fun. Experiment with the process of working with your hands and creating something. Now, it could be a bucket list item. It could be an actual dream you have. It could even just be something you do to try and have fun. But nonetheless, do something with your hands to build something that will last, something that you can pass on to your children. It will be a lot of fun. It will push your boundaries of what's possible. It will encourage those dreams and ideas and unlock even new passions that you didn't even know existed. So get out there, work with those hands, turn those dreams and ideas into doing the dreams and ideas you have. Ultimately, chase those dreams and ideas and change the world around you.
Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant. Dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps, vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.